Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this week's Product London. Great to have you all with us this week. This is our second Product London session of 2021. And I was just having a good chat to Antton, who's our speaker for this evening. And we were talking about the benefits from all involved to these meetups. So it's really great to see some returnees and some new faces as well. So I was chatting also to Antton, and we want it to be quite an interactive session this evening. So at any point throughout the session, if you do really want to jump in and speak to Antton, then please do that by either putting a question in the chat at the bottom, or ideally just raise your hand through the sort of ability that you can do on Zoom, and we can jump in that way. But then also halfway through Anton's talk, he's sort of changing subjects, so there'll be a perfect moment which I'll let Antton talk to you about as to when you can also jump in and have some conversations there. But as I said, I want it to be a really interactive session, so do get involved this evening. If I could just ask though, that during the session, whilst Antton is speaking, it'd be great if you could just remain on mute, just so it really helps with the fluidity of the talk and allows Antton that sort of perfect silence that we all look for on a Zoom call, and he'll be able to sort of deliver his talk perfectly clear. So this evening, I have managed to secure Antton Pena. He is the founder and CPO at Flock. Now, Flock are a drone and connected vehicle insurance company. His talk this evening is From Zero to One, Structuring a Product Team from Scratch. So I'm now going to hand over to you, Antton, and you can pick things up from there.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Alex, and thank you everybody that made it today. I'll just reiterate what Alex just mentioned. It looks like we've got a relatively cozy team today, so instead of me just talking at you, I think it'd be fantastic to have a bit of a roundtable. The ideas I'll probably talk about today are ideas that will contradict with many of you. So if we can just have a bit of a chat about it, fantastic. To keep things going, we'll probably keep it to the raise hands rule, but don't feel that you have to follow the rules to make the most of tonight. So I'll kick things off by sharing my screen. I think it should do. Are we all good? Fantastic. I've got a thumbs up from Alex. I'll just start. As Alex said, I'm going to try to talk you through how we went about building a product function at Flock. I think the thing that inspired this like story on me was that like any book you read about product management, about like structuring like product leadership teams, talks about one recipe. And I've also always believed that companies evolve, companies go through different phases, and product management should evolve with it as well. So I just wanted to challenge that thought of like the one playbook game, and talk to you about how we've done it instead. So I've split the talking in two different sections. The first one is just Flock's history, so how we've gone about doing what we do, and I'll tell you what that is. And then the second part is going to be about talking around that product team evolution. So let's kick things off. Quick intro to myself. As I said, Antton Pena, founder and CPO of Flock. I've got a bit of history in the design and startup world. One of my very first jobs was for Audi as a car designer. I did that for a couple of years, but realized that I had way more to deliver in small setups. I came to the UK and founded a company called Farewell, who digitizes the end of life planning in a way. I'm sure their pitch will be stronger than mine is now. They're doing an amazing job at the moment and growing very well, very quickly. Probably one of the fastest growing UK companies. So definitely have an eye, because they've got an amazing product. And when I left Farewell, I started Flock, which initially was a bit of a master thesis from myself that became into a technology, and that's then like emerged a company, or enabled us to create a company at the back of that technology. So what's the reason why Flock exists is because vehicles are increasingly connected and autonomous. We see all sorts of new vehicles starting to move around us, from drones, which is already a reality, and we see industries using them nowadays, but we're starting to see how connected fleets are starting to change the landscapes of our cities. Autonomous vehicles are definitely around the corner, and although we probably don't see them yet, there are a bunch of companies developing and delivering flying cars as well. So in that ecosystem, in that world, is where Flock was born. The problem is that in that changing world, insurers haven't necessarily changed, and we've seen how for decades insurance or the insurance industry has operated in the exact same way, and that ends up causing a massive problem for customers. We see how insurance constantly prices policies in the way they've been pricing for years and years, and that, if the customer is operating in a safe manner, ends up creating an overcharged scenario, right, where the customer ends up paying for premiums they shouldn't be paying because they deserve cheaper premiums, but because there's a safer customer. We also see how outdated processes mess around customers, and the need for insurance companies to follow a very specific and rigid process forces customers to send data in a specific format, interact with human stakeholders in a way, and overall what happens is that this one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter approach ends up leaving a bunch of innovative, fast-moving customers underserved as well. So that's where we come in. We provide commercial insurance that's up to speed with modern fleets. That's how we say it, and we've got three core product pillars. We believe that our insurance should be fairly priced, should always be flexible, and should provide transparent risk analysis so customers can understand how risky their operation is, and therefore can get an idea of why they're paying what they're paying. And we do all of this via a bunch of technology, digital interfaces, but most importantly, our risk engine. That's the core of everything we do at Flock. A risk engine taps into a bunch of data sources that are somehow related with what we insure. So if we're insuring drones, for example, we tap into things like hyperlocal weather, geospatial data points around where the drone's flying, details about the pilot. Similarly, if we're insuring a connected vehicle, for example, the data sets are just slightly different. We take all of those data items, we crunch those numbers with our risk engine, and we predict risk in a quantified manner. So we output a technical risk report with a risk number that helps the customer understand how risky their operation is, but it also helps us price insurance fairly. So the riskier the operation is, the more the customer pays, the more they do to mitigate the risk by using our risk insights, the cheaper their premiums. So let's look at our history a little bit. How did all of this happen? Because we didn't wake up one day saying, let's just become a connected insurance company. So the beginnings, which I call where guerrilla product management, were predominantly around launching a drone product. We're the very, very first company in providing a regulated or accepted by the regulator pay-as-you-fly insurance product in the world, which was a massive achievement. We focused in the commercial drone space, and this was back 3.5 years ago now, when we decided that the problem I just described, the problem of insurance companies not understanding the space and customers, very much applied in this commercial drone space. When we talk about commercial drones, we are talking about all sorts of operations, right? We're not just talking about like wedding photographer taking photos with their drone cameras. We're talking about deliveries, and we can see how the NHS is, for example, running a bunch of trials Royal Mail is doing the same. We've got a bunch of retailers doing that. And that's a really cool, that photo is from a really cool company called Man Arrow, an Irish company that is doing incredible stuff in the delivery space. So definitely go and check them out. We also see how drones are massively changing the landscape in remote sensing and photography. In all sorts of industries, from media, obviously, but also in farming, in mapping, in oil and gas. We see how drones are being used to inspect oil rigs, for example. But we also see incredible operations in areas like search and rescue, in maritime search and rescue, but also blue lights organizations are massively using them to change the way they operate. So in this space is when we realized that insurers were actually struggling to quantify risk and sensibly price premium because they didn't have an understanding of what this industry was. They didn't know what could go wrong, and that's exactly the premise on which they're bet, right? They quantify what can go wrong. They quantify how many claims they'll have to pay, and at the back of that, they provide you with a premium for your policy. When you've got an insurance company that cannot sensibly price premium, what happens is that the pilot ends up paying the bill. Right, so that's the problem space we started operating in. So as mentioned before, we launched the Europe's first pay-as-you-fly insurance product. That's the best one, the first one to be approved by a regulator worldwide. And that was done by providing our customers with an app, right? It was an app that, as you can see, provided a map with a circle. That's our icon in a way. And the customer moved that map to start planning their flight. When they drop the map in an area, the app would automatically calculate a risk score, helping the customer understand how risky that flight was. As you can see there, the customer would get a set of risk insights as well to help them understand why that number is what it is. And then at the back of that, in a couple of seconds, they could simply insure that flight. And I've got a short video here. Let's hope it works for you to understand how that whole interaction works. So the customer comes here, they choose the drone they're flying with. So they've got a list of drones in their garage. They pick that DJI Inspire 2, and they simply click that risk number to see what risks they've got in the area they're flying. They get a 47 number, but you'll see how they now start moving the map around to see how the risk changes. This is relatively dramatic because the customer is trying to fly around London, which is very, very unusual. That's not something our customers tend to often do. And as the customer is moving around, you can see how that risk number is recalculated. The risk list, it's also recalculated, and the premium number also changes over time. So the customer can now tweak the details of their policy, and they can simply purchase insurance by clicking in that big confirm button. This is an old product. This is not the product we offer nowadays. This was that like guerrilla product management phase product, and this is how it used to work at the time. We currently offer a product with a very similar experience, but it's obviously way more modern, and it is just one of the range of products we currently offer. So I'll keep moving. Oops. So launching this product, it wasn't easy. There were a ton of issues around making it work, and the big problem we ended up bumping into was that the regulator, the aviation regulator, who used to approve insurance policies, decided that a pay-as-you-fly product where you only paid for the flight you were flying was not compliant with regulation. Right? Try to put yourselves in our position. Very small company, probably 4 or 5 people with a new idea of how insurance should work, that had raised a little bit of money, had a bunch of investors looking at them to launch this product they had said they were going to launch, and suddenly a regulator tells them they cannot be selling their insurance because it is not compliant, right? Like we completely freaked out. We didn't know what to do. We didn't know how to move ahead. So, and this is why I call it that guerrilla product management phase, right? Because it was literally survival. So what we had to, and this is a bit of an anecdote, what we had to end up doing was basically start interacting with that regulator, with the Civil Aviation Agency, try to understand what we had to do to get them comfortable with the product we were offering, right? The problem at the time was that if a customer was operating commercially, they required a license from the CAA, the Civil Aviation Agency. And in order to get that license, the CAA wanted to see that the customer had compliant insurance that had already been purchased. Now, if you're selling insurance that's purchased on the spot, the regulator has no way of verifying that that customer has access to compliant insurance. So what we had to do was give the regulatory way so they could verify that that customer would be purchasing insurance. At the end of the day, it ended up being just a document we called a cover note. That was a document that the CAA would verify the customer had, which meant that the customer had created an account with us, that the customer had added their drones on their account, and that they would be purchasing insurance when they were about to fly. And that document makes that very, very clear. But it took us 11 iterations of this document. It took us 2 law firms working on this to make this thing happen. And for a firm that's literally a small startup that's literally fighting for survival, that was a massive, massive hurdle. So this is why I call this like beginnings phase, the guerrilla product management bit, which it's all about operating in a niche market, very, very small space with a very niche product, right? We knew that our product was great for those operators that wanted to purchase insurance on the go. I wanted to purchase insurance for those sporadic flights they were doing, and we made it happen in survival mode. The second stage, which is what I call the exploratory product management phase, is the time when we started looking into the market, trying to understand how we could expand that, right? We launched the product, we made it work, we had a bunch of customers that loved it, but taking that to the next stage wasn't as easy. We realized that some customers were happy purchasing insurance in hourly basis, but those customers that were flying at scale could definitely benefit with a slightly more stable, more traditional policy. So that's what we did. We went from small, infrequent customers and over time expanded our offering first to small teams with a monthly policy, then to larger drone fleets with an annual fully digital policy, and then launched a large-scale enterprise product that would cater for the largest drone fleets worldwide, really. And we now have a couple of products that do that with a bunch of sub-products inside them. So we've got a flat fee or a fixed fee product and a usage-based product, and this is a snapshot of our website. And customers can choose how they're going to be paying, right? So we provide them with full flexibility. The customer decides if they want to pay based on the usage of their drones, or if they want to pay a fixed fee for covering their fleets. And with that, we start funneling them through a completely digital process. And that's allowed us, as mentioned before, to constantly expand that offering from segment to segment and end up capturing a large percent of the market. Right now, we've got around 30% of the commercial operator market here in the UK. We're expanding to Europe, and we're just growing that level of penetration like worldwide, really. And you can see that in the numbers, right? Like you can see how that growth it's consistent. We've got a bit of a hockey stick diagram. These are real numbers of our book right now, and you can see how we went from a almost plateaued period to really kicking things up, right? And that is exactly when we moved on from that guerrilla phase to that exploratory phase. We realized that we had to expand our products, and that is when things really kicked off. So that second phase, it's about still operating in a niche market, but starting to launch a number of niche products that would cater to a set of customers within the market. And the third phase, which is the one I call a systematic product management phase, is about, in our case, taking our product beyond the drone space. So we moved we're moving from the drone space to the commercial motor space. And the reason why we're moving into this is because we feel that the problem space is very, very similar, right? It is a market that's changing very quickly. We've got mass adoption of connectivity, so vehicles that are starting to come out of factories are starting to come out with internet connection within it. We see how there's a rise in new business models. So we see the CPOs of this world, the self-drive hire companies that are providing leasing vehicles instead of trying to sell vehicles to us, massive in big cities like London. And finally, we see that there's a dramatic change in ownership models as well, right? We no longer dream about buying a big expensive car. We are happy paying for the use of it. And what that does is it doesn't reduce the number of vehicles in the roads, but it changes ownership from individuals to companies. So this is why we're starting to get interested in that commercial motor space. In this rapidly changing space, we realize that we still have the same problems we identified in the drone space, right? So there's an endless back and forth between insurer and insured to get prices for the fleets. There's very, very low transparency and trust from the insured to the insurer. It's just a negotiation game of who gets the best deal. The claims process tends to be very, very opaque, and all of that results in unfair pricing for our customer, right? So it feels like there's a space that's ripe for disruption and a bit of fluffness. So this is why we ended up launching in this motor space. And this is an article that talks about our launch where we're basically porting everything we've done in the drone space to this commercial motor space. But the article I really like is this one. And they were both launched at the same time, but one talks about how we're doing something in the motor space, and the other one talks about how we've got a very strong vision of where Flock can go. So this final stage, the systematic product management stage, is about ensuring that you can launch products to a market and fix those problems while making sure that everything is tying together, everything is following the same playbook, and taking the company to where it needs to go. So in the motor space, we offer two probably very familiar products after the slide I showed before, which are a vehicle-based product and a usage-based product. So in one, you pay for the number of vehicles you've got in your fleet. So that's almost a flat fee, flexible policy. And in the other product, you pay for the amount of driving your fleet has done, which is a truly usage-based solution. And again, this starting to fit within that playbook, that framework we built in the drone space. It's just about expanding that to the next and the next and the next segment. The value propositions are exactly the same. We still have completely digital interfaces where customers can log in, see what kind of risk they're exposing themselves to, and we double down in those initial product pillars I mentioned, right? Fairness, flexibility, and that risk intelligence that we mentioned at the beginning. So we're not reinventing the wheel. We're just taking everything we've done in the past, everything we've learned in the past to a whole new level. And this is starting to pay up, right? Like this is when you really unlock a massive market. So in just 2 months from launch, we launched this on the 8th of December, I think. We've multiplied the business pipeline by 10. And we've already captured 5% of the number of drone customers we've got, right? And this only happened in 2 months. So imagine how big the opportunity can be, which is huge, right? We're looking at an £8 billion market just in premium, just in the UK, which compared to drones, which is growing massively, it's huge, right? UK versus drones global. Drones global is 1 billion versus UK 8 billion. So that is where I end with our story in a way, right? You can see 3 clear steps of what we've been unlocking over time. And this final stage is about like taking a range of products that we had already built and launching it into a number of markets that really justify it from an opportunity perspective. So again, these are the 3 steps: guerrilla, exploratory, and systematic. I'm happy to take a couple of questions now. I'm not very familiar with Zoom, but if someone raised their hands, you can definitely let me know.
Ian, I think you had a question if you want to jump in.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for the talk. Just wondered, how did you connect with the potential customers before launch to understand the problem space?
So to begin with, I had written a thesis in this space, right? So I was a little bit of the expert in a way. So founder and product manager with a strong vision. That's all I had in mind, right? I had a bit of a network of pilots already. So my ideas had been very much shaped by what these customers were struggling with. So it wasn't hard for me to find a network. It just happened very naturally. And I'll talk about that in a second, because that's one of the main challenges during that guerrilla phase, right? Like understanding what the market needs. And you, as a PM, in my opinion, you always need an unfair advantage. So why you're the right person to actually tackle that specific market. Do I have any more questions, Alex?
Yeah, one has come in. Nick, do you want to ask?
Sorry, hello. Yeah, my question is actually a little bit similar to the one that's just been asked, but it's about the difference you found between B2B and B2C stakeholder management. Can you outline the difference that you experienced when you kind of upgraded the products from what was essentially a consumer sort of individual sales proposition to something that was a little more enterprise business focused, B2B focused proposition? How did you find the interaction with stakeholders, and how did you find stakeholder management change in that regard?
Very good question. So, and I actually, that was one of the topics one of the plan B topics I had for today, that B2B product management world, which is a completely different beast to the B2C one. The biggest difference is volume, right? In the D2C space, it's really easy to get hold of customers. You just go out there, you find a few people that fly drones, and you start talking to them. The challenge in the B2B space is that's really hard to find them, and as soon as you find them, you have to start selling something to them, which they push back on directly, right? So this is personally, if you're launching something from scratch in a new market in a guerrilla way, unless you've got a very strong unfair advantage in that market, I believe that doing it directly in B2B will be really hard, right? And I think what we did very successfully was getting to a market that had a bunch of customers that were happy to talk to us because they were very easy to reach, and there was high volume of that type of customer. And we then started using that to reach out to those B2B ones. So there's a clear transition, there's an expansion where instead of going to a B2B customer with something from scratch, you're going to them with a story, right? And that's exactly one of the things we're doing now in the motor space. In the motor space, we only deal with B2B customers. We've got a handful of them, but we're the best friends of them, right? So we don't run interviews, we don't run surveys, we don't gather massive amounts of data, but we do jump on a phone call with them every week, right? When doing that with a D2C customer is really, really hard because you've got a massive amount of them. So you change your strategy to, like, I don't know, use Hotjar, for example, or try to gather data at volume that will give you an understanding of where you're going.
Very good, thank you.
A bit of a rambly answer, but Nick, we might be able to come back to that concept after we've gone through the second bit, because I think there will be a few bits that will help us structure that conversation a bit.
Sure, thank you.
Anything else, Alex?
No, that's enough. That's all the questions that have come in for now. So yeah, over to you. But I will just say, do keep the questions coming, everyone. As I say, we really want an interactive session tonight, and it is great to hear from you all and interact with Antton. So do keep them coming. Antton, over to you.
Amazing. Look, so I'll continue with the same story, right? This is the thesis I want to talk to you about. I feel like there's a clear transition from stage to stage. And there are a number of things that have to change inevitably, so you can continue being current with the stage at which you are as a company, right? So these are the three concepts we'll talk about: guerrilla, exploratory, and systematic. First one is about tackling a niche. The second one is about trying different avenues and understanding in what direction you can move on. We tried a few that will never make history and that we had to kill very, very quickly, and that's okay, because we made it to a stage where we understood what our model was, we understood what the process and structure were, and that is what led us to that systematic way of thinking. The challenge is that there are a bunch of things that, there are a bunch of attributes that constantly change as you move on, right? When you're operating in a guerrilla world, and Nick, this might touch on some of the topics we just discussed, you've got a massive risk appetite, right? Your investors have a massive risk appetite, so you very quickly go with something, you put something out there, you get a bunch of people to give you some input and move on. You're incredibly fast. You've got a very, very tiny team. You might just be yourself with 8 developers, so you can move very, very quickly. You can break things. You don't have a big technology platform to maintain. So it's almost just about building that front end. But most importantly, your customers are super forgiving, right? Like, you've built a relationship with a bunch of them. You've got a number of them, at least if you operate in the D2C space. So you can screw them over a little bit. You can fail them a little bit because they'll stay there. You're operating in a small niche where you've identified a strong problem, a big problem, and you're just fixing that, so they'll stay with you. The problem is that all of that reduces over time, right? Once you've got thousands of customers, your customers are no longer forgiving. Your customers don't know you're building something from scratch. Your customers might struggle to understand what your vision is as well, so you have to nail it. And your risk appetite changes as well. You've got a bunch of investors that really want to see that curve grow. They don't want to see massive mistakes. So you're going to have to continue making mistakes while ensuring that the big machine continues working, right? In 10, there are a few things that actually grow, or you end up getting more of some of these things, right? First, clarity of your value proposition. You've made a bunch of mistakes already. You know how you operate. The reason why we can talk about fairness, flexibility, and transparency as our core product pillars is because we've been there for quite some time. We've understood what resonates with customers, and we're just doubling down with that. Access to data and customers is much, much bigger. And this is why you can continue doing pretty much the same thing in the B2B space, because you're already well known, you're already delivering a service, so you've got a much easier way in a way. And the data you're getting, it's also of a much higher volume, right? At the beginning, you have to try to come up with a bunch of insights with the 5 customers you've got. Once you've got 1,000 customers visiting you every day, understanding what's going wrong is much, much easier. Infrastructure also helps for the good and the bad, right? It will definitely slow you down, so that speed goes down, but your support for new things is much, much higher. So, you want to launch a new product that you might be able to do it in the exact same infrastructure or technology platform you've got, which might take a couple of days instead of having to build something from scratch. But of course, the revenue expectation on you massively grows as well, which again forces you to move faster, right? So these two are completely related with one another, which again requires you to constantly change mode and operate in a completely different manner. So that's why I say that for this reason, you have to change that approach to product manager constantly. In a guerrilla world, you will be completely visioned. You know where you want to go. That vision is super far, so the moves you'll make will be massive. You'll be incredibly reactive, because as soon as one customer tells you there's something wrong, you'll change everything to please them. You will be incredibly fast-paced, and you will operate in a launch what you can and then test mode, right? When I say launch what you can, it might be a paper prototype, it might be a crappy interface, but you'll just put it out there, bring some customers in. In an exploratory way, you're more focused in big hairy goals, right? You know what your vision is. You've got something that already serves some customers, but you want to achieve something huge. You've got either a big target, either a big market you want to enter. You start operating in a more trial and error way. You start going through cycles, right? So you go very, very quickly to build a prototype and then slow down to see how customers work, and then start moving fast again and slow down again. And your modus operandi in a way it's around building end-to-end prototypes. You can no longer just launch a small part somewhere. You have to provide a product to a customer, and then you test it and you build again and test it, right? So you have to get to a point before going out to customers. And in a systematic world, you're way more goals based, right? Goals focused. You've got that specific target you need to hit. You've got that conversion number you have to improve. So you start making small changes, which is about operating the target optimization way. You move slowly. You launch experiments and see what happens and gather data and react to it again. And overall, you operate in an insights gathering mode first. You then launch your prototype. You then test it, build again, and measure, right? And that circle fits back in. This is really hard to achieve. This systematic one, by the way, is the one every book talks about, right? And it's very easy to think about this process, but it's really, really hard for you to implement it when you just one product manager, or you've got a PM and a developer. You've got no data. You don't know what metrics matter to you. So like hoping that you can test everything by looking at numbers is unfair, right? So like trying to be a systematic product manager when you should be operating in a guerrilla way, it's very dangerous. Because your modus operandi changes, you also need completely different profiles, right? So in the guerrilla world, you need someone that's an entrepreneur, with a very scrappy mentality, with a very clear vision, and ideally an unfair advantage understanding their market, right? They almost have to be an insider. As you move to exploratory, you need someone that's a bit of a toolbox, right? Someone that can play with mixed panels, someone that can write a little bit of code, and someone that it's a bit of a design guru. They need to have a long-term understanding of what success means to the business and a good understanding of the business model for the company. And overall, they'll require a balanced understanding of the market and the technology you use. And in a systematic world, this is where the product manager can be as agnostic as you like, right? They can be an expert in the PM product management process. They can be incredibly analytical and methodical, have a strong understanding of the company's goals, and be very, very good with that process as mentioned. What this means is that your culture also has to change, right? So we've got the approach, you've got the individual that's leading that, and you've got the overall culture of the company. In a guerrilla mode, you can build quickly, break and build again, and that's absolutely fine. You can embrace uncertainty, you have to embrace uncertainty, and you have to learn to accept that most of what you do doesn't or will not work. In exploratory worlds, you're going to have to learn to recycle what you've got to move more quickly, accept that the customers you're now working with are going to be different to the customers you were working with, and learn to operate in a multi-persona way, and be prepared to see the project you're working on close, but ideally as a reaction mechanism to save the company. And finally, in a systematic planet, you're going to have a culture that knows how to build incrementally, that knows how to build hypotheses with the metrics they've got, and then use those metrics to prove if that hypothesis was right or wrong. And finally, ensure that continuous launch and test and launch way works, or mentality works. And all of these three phases almost builds a flywheel, right? A cycle that repeats itself. This diagram, I added our colors to this diagram, but this is inspired by Blitzscaling, which is a book written by Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn. And the concept he talks about is this concept of companies going through waves, right? Where they do something that provides a level of value to their customers, and therefore a push to their KPIs, but then that starts flattening a little bit. And the only way of continuing growing is by jumping on another wave and another wave and another wave. And because the company learns how to make the most of those waves, the impact of each of those waves gets amplified, right? That's beautifully illustrates this concept of different life cycles for that product management process, right? At the beginning, the gorilla phase will be longer in proportion than the exploratory or the systematic one, but as you go through more and more cycles, you will need less of that gorilla concept and way more of that systematic phase, because you already know how your company works, you already have access to a bunch of customers, you already have a technology platform, so it's about doing more of what you have better and faster. I know I'm starting to be over time, so I'll try to wrap up very, very quickly. So all of this, in my opinion, has to be maintained as tightly as possible, right? This is not just about having a PM that understands this. Unfortunately, the whole company has to understand that they're going through these phases, right? And in my view, the only way of doing it is by ensuring that the different functions you've got that are empowering you to launch a product are actually wrapped into one same function. So this is what we do at Flock. Tech, product, and data, in our case, I called it science here, are wrapped by one function. That's the function I lead, the product function. Internally, we call it P2D, product, tech, and data. But that means that data science, product management, and technology work very, very closely together. I sometimes treat developers as if they were product managers and make them talk to internal stakeholders or potentially even customers. And I push product managers to understand how data science or how technology is worked, right? So I really believe in all of them working very, very closely. I've got a couple of slides here of how to build a system, right? So in that world where we accept that we're going through cycles, that we're already in a systematic planet, we use two tools to make all of this happen. Product Board and Jira, they work beautifully together. It looks like the logos were designed by the same designer even. And what we do is have a bit of a cyclical system that allows us to be constantly listening to what the company is saying, and ensure that all of that ends up wrapped up in a beautiful roadmap everyone can understand. So we're constantly looking for insights, requests, and issues. We then move on to a project ideation process, which is fully owned by the PM, and they come up with projects we can work on to react to those insights or customer needs. We then run a PPP, a product prioritization panel, which is where we involve the whole company, and then we create a roadmap. We've got a bit of detail here. So that first stage, the insight, request, issue gathering stage, happens organically throughout the quarter. That block I showed you is a quarter-long cycle, where ideas from Slack, ideas from the customer support team that are gathered in workshops or one-to-ones, the sales team in the same way, from data through our KPIs or our analytics systems, or from our back collection form, are all gathered into one repository. At the moment, that's relatively informal. It's just either a list of notes on Product Board or a Confluence page. And all of that gets taken into Product Board, where we start creating a bunch of projects that could resolve some of those problems, right? So we say, okay, we're going to build this feature that allows customers to start a policy in the future, and that's going to solve some of the pain points here, and we leave them on the board. During PPP, that product prioritization panel, we get the business to vote on concepts, right? And this is a session where the product manager has no say. So the product manager presents the project ideas we've got to fix the problems we have. We get the business side of things to vote on value from 1 to 5 on how much they believe a project will impact our targets. And then we get the tech team to add a score value. And that automatically comes up with a value effort number, which inevitably creates a roadmap, right? Naturally creates a roadmap. So once you've got that product score value ratio, value effort ratio, you end up automatically building a roadmap that then gets fed back to the business so they can understand what we're working. And all of that, it's something they decided we were doing, right? It's not about us being precious about what we're building, it's about enabling them to get what they really need. And then it's automatically connected to Jira, so the tech team works on Jira and delivers all those tickets. So all of these delivers a bunch of benefits. First, it's got a very established process, so everyone knows how to work together. It also defines a set of responsibilities, so the PM knows what they need to do and who they're working with and what their role is in all of that. It's not about deciding what to build next, it's about enabling the decision making of what to build next. And finally, it creates a clear set of objectives, right? The PM knows they have to build a roadmap by the end of the quarter. The business knows they've got a number of objectives, and both teams working together are about making sure that those KPIs are hit. And overall, the benefit is that you end up decentralizing the decision making and increasing alignment throughout the company. There are a number of things we got wrong, and this is why I added a pink slide, but I won't bore you with this for now. If we've got time and the people in the call wants me to walk you through it, I'll definitely come back. But this is me. This is all I had to say. I know it was relatively long, so apologies. I'm very interested in connecting with a few like-minded people. So those are my credentials. Here, please follow me or just ping me a message. Especially if you want to challenge my ideas, because that's what I'm after. I'm also completely new to Clubhouse, so if you wanna help me understand how that app works, I'm very much up for a session there.
Antton, thank you very much. That was absolutely fantastic. Really enjoyed listening to that and hearing all about it. Kieran, you had a question. Do you want to jump in and ask Antton?
Yeah, hi Antton. Thanks very much. Really informative. My question was around how clearly you've got a strong product background. I'm interested in how you found the shift from, I guess purely being product focused, but then thinking about an entire business. And then also I'm interested if that's taught you anything to think, to sort of tell your product focused self from a few years back.
So I think my background is in design, not necessarily product management, right? So I had a strong background in design and understanding how products should be, but not how to build products. But I also had a bit of a thrill around entrepreneurship. So I've always been quite connected to that business side. I think what took me relatively long is to understand the bridge in between the two of them, right? Which is that product management concept, and understand that that's a moving thing. It's not a static set of tools you learn and you stick to them, right? So the hardest part for me was that one, understanding that's all about building systems. It's not about you building a product. It's not about just designing the perfect thing, and that took me too long. I think now we're in a beautiful position at Flock, and we've got a strong system and an understanding of how to work. But I think we've gone through a few hurdles where the team was lost, or we had the organization siloed, and we didn't know how to deal with data, or the tech team didn't know what to do with data, which meant that the business team didn't know what to make of that data and things like that. So I think that's the bridge I struggled to build, and I'm quite glad I now kind of see it, which is what I tried to achieve. I tried to explain here.
Great, thank you.
And Ian, did you want to jump in? You asked a question to ask, do you use data to assess value?
So we now do. We're getting there with our data structure as well. We've got we're actually now finishing a project that restructures the way data is consumed internally and enabling the rest of the business to consume that data as well. But it's been really hard for very long to make anything out of data, right? We didn't know what our KPIs were, or they would change every month. Our reporting layer was terrible. We would change the structure of our data weekly. So our BI layer, our business intelligence layer, would constantly break. So that's what's inspired me to have these phases, right? You have to accept that when you're in a guerrilla mode, you're not going to have good data, right? And you can try, but that setup will very quickly break, right? So try to get something, try to make the most of it, and jump onto the next stage. In the exploratory phase, you've got a bit more structure, and you can start getting more input from that. In the systematic world is when you can make the most of it, right? And right now we've got very strong a very strong understanding of conversion. We know where drop-off happens. We're now starting to generate a bunch of ideas to improve that whole funnel. We know what customers convert better, how that compares to marketing. So now, yes, but it's taken painfully long to get to that position, and I think you just have to embrace it.
Thank you very much. Do I have any more questions from anyone else in the audience this evening? Okay, Kieran, how do you tackle technical debt? Antton.
Ooh, very good question. Badly. I am not a techie myself, so the best I could end up doing was accepting that there were a few that I had to I had to trust in this front. The methods that we're experimenting with now, so I'm not going to claim that this is a tested a tested mechanism, is every engineer, we've got a rota where we've got one engineer on page duty, we call it. So it's about being on call to receive any system failures. So that engineer that's on page duty has no roadmap responsibilities, right? So we pause the project and we say, okay, this week you're just going to be looking at what happens to our platform and fixing bugs and errors. And what that does is it creates a bunch of idle moments. We then recycle that time, that idle time, with a number of tech debt items to assign to every engineer a month, right? So at the beginning of the month, we run a tech debt categorization session, we call it, where we just go through the tech debt backlog we've been filling throughout the month. We get engineers to commit to specific tickets, and we say, okay, it looks like there are like around 3 days of work to fix tech debts that you can commit to this month. And it feels like that page duty time leaves around 2 to 3 days of idle time. So we inject that tech debt into the roadmap automatically and make sure that there are specific owners to fix that tech debt, which is what makes the flywheel move on its own almost. But again, Kieran, if you've got a better method, please let me know, because I'm all ears.
Thank you very much. And any more questions from anyone? Okay. I'd just like to say a massive thank you, Antton, for your talk this evening. It was really, really clear and concise, very, very engaging, very informative, and some great visuals as well. I really, really enjoyed it, and it's exactly what we look for from Product London, and I hope everyone in the audience enjoyed it too. The session has been recorded and will be up on our YouTube channel by tomorrow late morning. Usually goes up within 24 hours, so do catch out for that one. Antton mentioned it. Do reach out to him on LinkedIn, connect, continue conversation that way. If you are looking to get involved in Product London or Agile London, reach out to me and we can sort of talk about you speaking or being involved. If you're looking for work, do also reach out. My main job is recruitment at Oliver. Reach out if you are looking for a new role or if you're looking to hire. Recruitment and product, especially in the last week, has completely boomed, so which is a great sign. And I've got some fantastic candidates looking, so do reach out if you're looking to hire as well. Antton, is there anything more you'd like to say before I close off?
No, just a big thank you for the great questions. You made me sweat.
Brilliant. Well, then all that leaves me to say is thank you very much, Antton. You have been brilliant this evening. Thank you to everyone for joining, and I hope to sort of see you all soon at a future event, and have a lovely evening. See you later.
Thank you.